guys, Kkstar12 here, and I'm sorry I didn't get to do my review last night. I was really tired, so I'm going to do it tonight. So last week I did a movie review called Child of Rage. Tonight I'm doing a movie review about Daddy's Girl. So it's basically the same story as Child of Rage, except there are a couple of differences. One of the differences is that it's the mother that caused the child to have a mental illness and not the father. In Child of Rage, the dad would get drunk and abuse his children. But in Daddy's Girl, a 4-year-old little girl named Jody had to witness her mom murdering her father. So, we cut to this scene where Jody has a nightmare, and in her dream, she dreams about, her adoptive father, played by William Catt, and her were going to her school, and her father had a meeting with her principal, Mrs. Hemp, played by Ruth Manning. And as Jody waited in the hallway, her dad asked a lot of questions about Jody. Why do you hate my daughter? What's wrong with her behavior? What do you have against her? And all that stuff. All of a sudden, Mrs. Hemp pulls out a gun and shoots her father. So Jody wakes up from the dream screaming, and her father comes in to comfort her. And that's the end of that scene. So the next day, it is the last day of school, and Jody wants to find a way to get Mrs. Hemp to like her. So her dad suggests, well, why don't you do a couple of book reports during the summer for extra credit? So she's like, okay. So she talks to Mrs. Hemp about it. Then Mrs. Hemp mentions the fact that she wants to send Jody to boarding school. And, of course, Jody's not happy. So instead, Mrs. Hemp wants to have a meeting about it with her parents. Meanwhile, her cousin comes to live with them during the summer. Her name was Karen Connors, played by Roxana Zhao. And I thought, they were going to be good friends. Jody would get some good influences by her. But eventually, Karen figures out Jody's past, which I will get to in a little bit. You've technically already seen it, but she goes deeper in it too. But anyway, so then the day of the meeting, Jody tells Karen that she's going to play in the park when really she is going to kill her principal. So she goes to the school and tricks Mrs. Hemp to stand up on a chair and get her a book to get her started on the book report. And as she gets up on the chair, Jody grabs the chair from under her, and she falls to the ground. And then she pushes the bookcase onto Mrs. Hemp, and she dies instantly. So before she left, she grabbed her permanent records and started shredding everything into pieces from it. So later that night, her family gets a phone call saying that Mrs. Hemp died. And Jody pretends to be all sympathetic, they were just starting to get along. But then she goes up to her room, and we find out she has this dollhouse where she keeps all the people that, she has resentments towards. And she has a box for each of the people that she wants to kill. So she puts Mrs. Hemp's doll in one of the boxes. Later that night, Karen comes up to her room and asks her if she wants to go to the park the next day. And Jody was like, oh, sure, yeah. So they went to the park and they talk about, about Mrs. Hemp and how Karen misses her dad, and everything. And then Jody says something very chilling. She says, accidents happen, people die. And I was like, okay, that was weird. So next we cut to this next scene where they have a barbecue and we meet Claire Landers, one of the girls who plays with Jody. She's really scared of Jody, played by Lindsay Ridgway. And her mother, Rachel Landers, played by Mimi Craven. Um, as Barbara and Rachel were talking about how Barbara should get a divorce from Don because of his job that he has, Jody and Claire pass food around to other people, and Jody says to Don that, that Barbara made him a drink. And then uh, Claire says, no, she didn't. You made that drink. And you made that lunch for your mom, too. So Claire goes off after that, and then Jody catches up with her and says, you shouldn't say things like that about my dad, and, and then she starts talking about how Mrs. Hemp's body is just rotting there, and bugs are crawling up onto it, and very soon when you die, bugs will do that to you too. And Karen catches her talking about it, and she claims that, they were just playing. So next part, Don and Barbara are arguing with each other because of Don's job. And as Jody overhears this, she knocks over a tray and pretends that it was an accident. Another scene that we cut to, we meet Jody's grandmother, and she is played by Peggy McKay, and she kind of doesn't really like Jody much, and she doesn't really like Don either because of his job. So one day, while she was there, Don and Jody went to the park, to talk about why Grandma hates them, yada yada yada. And then they have a brunch, and Jody tries to poison the grandmother with drain unclogged stuff. And, the grandmother was starting a fight with Don, saying stuff like, I don't know how Barbara can hold up with this job that you have and all that. And there you get in a big argument, and Jody is like telling them to sit down and eat. And after she left, the dad was like, oh, I'll drink her juice. And Jody was like, don't drink it. And she knocks it to the floor. And so the next scene that we see is when Jody goes over to her grandmother's house, and she spies that her mom and the grandma are talking about the same thing that Rachel was talking about, divorcing Don. You're not getting enough money from his job that he has. And Jody overhears that, and she stays for a while and pretends to play hide and seek with her grandmother, but instead she pushes her down the stairs. And so she goes home after that, and that was the end of that scene. So finally there was a scene where Jody heads up to Claire, and how Claire just tells her, your mom's gonna get a divorce and she's taking you away from your dad. And so she decides to kill Rachel's mother as well. So later on, the family goes to the hospital to check on the grandmother, and she was doing great. She came out of her coma, but of course Jody was not happy. So she decides to kill her while she was in the hospital bed. She turns off all the vents and clogs up the ventilator tube to keep her from breathing, and she dies instantly after that. And then back to Karen, she finds Jody's social worker, Mark Springer, played by Whip Hubley, and he comes by the house to check on Jody and everybody. But by that time, she already had pushed her mother, Barbara, off the balcony from her bedroom. And so her dad was just coming home from a toy convention. And so he was all excited that his toy invention won some sort of award or something. And, Karen eventually goes to Jody and asks her, do you remember what your mother was like? And she explains that her mother was crazy. She killed her father. And so Dawn comes back and finds, the social worker dead on the floor because Jody whacked him with a mallet. And he goes outside to check on Barbara, who was just laying there on the floor. And he finds out that Jody had done all this. And the movie doesn't really actually stop per se. It just stops after she talks about how everybody's against her and everything. So that was Daddy's Girl for you. And I honestly loved both of these movies, Child of Rage and Daddy's Girl. But I'll let you guys be the judge and check out the movie for yourself. Now, next week, I will be doing another movie review on Disney Channel original movies Descendants, starring Dove Cameron, Kristen Chenoweth, and Cameron Boyce. So, I hope to see you guys next week. Bye!